welcome back to the Pulse. And obviously, security was the focus when we started, but we're not losing sight of education as well, because the Ghana Association of Private Schools, NAP, is upset over what they term as discrimination in the ongoing computerized school selection system. Now, according to the group, a recent decision by the Ghana Education Service to reserve additional 30% of all placements into grade A schools for public school children goes contrary to dictates of Article 25 of the Ghanaian Constitution, which states that secondary education in its different forms shall be made generally available and accessible to all. In view of this, the group wants the senior high school computerized placement system to be handled by a neutral body to ensure fairness. Well, fortunately, we've been joined now by Kin SL, who's the General Secretary for NAPS. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us here on the Pulse.
Thank you for having me on the studio.
Ordinarily, we would expect that when it comes to issues of placement, the Ghana Education Service would take charge of that. Why are you usurping, and that's the word many would use, the authority that has been placed with the GES to handle issues of education?
Okay, thank you very much, and then I wish all my listeners a happy interview,
right.
A fine interview.
Right.
Before this time, we had this placement system for about 10 years, during which Ghana Education Service was the sole implementers of ministry's policy. So the ministry formulated policies, and GES was the sole implementers.
Right.
So they were in charge of both public and private schools. The situation is no longer the same. This time they are handling only public schools, and private schools are supposed to be fending for themselves. So they have lost the right over public and private. No wonder they are beginning to discriminate against students from private schools. And so it's natural that once they are focusing on only public schools, they would think that public schools are the only Ghanaian children who must be placed. And
let's go through the claims. And basically all of this concern is stemming from what you claim is a statement of Professor Amankwa, who's the Director General of the Ghana Education Service, claiming that first of all, there would be a need for some entrance exams that all persons moving from private into public senior high schools would have to take. And a raft of the demands you're also making are on the screens right now. You're also talking about the fact that the Ghana Education Service has now become the public education service representing only public schools. That's your first claim. Then you're also going ahead to talk about the fact that if their role should be properly redefined, then it will mean that no school will provide them with data. And you go on with issues of fairness and asking, for instance, the National School Inspectorate Authority to handle this, and you are serving finally notice that you would resist what you're describing as discriminatory practices. So these are your demands, key demands really. So that's why I'm asking the question as to how you feel we can properly go about this.
So the first naturally is to bring stakeholders' attention to what is happening,
right,
which is unfair. The idea behind getting the 30% from the local people, the chiefs, and then distributing it was to ensure that children in deprived communities, right, who couldn't get the opportunity of making the grades that are needed should be given that opportunity, because we have seen that sometimes because they didn't get a lot of resources, they do not do well. But when they move on, they tend to do better. But we find similar poor deprived private schools as well in the rural area. So if you are serving, if the idea is to serve deprived schools, then look at deprived schools in both public and private, and not just looking at public deprived schools. That's our first concern. Because if you do that, if you are just trying to favor only public school students, what actually happens is this: you are trying to indirectly say that if children want better opportunities, they should start leaving private schools to public JSS schools to get that same opportunity that they would have had in their schools. I think it's unfair. The Constitution does not allow for us to discriminate against them. He also made claims to the fact that elsewhere we have community schools, only persons in the community were allowed to attend the community schools, as if to suggest that the schools, the public schools, are owned by them. those schools in the community schools, where he's talking about in the advanced countries, are funded by the taxes of the community. And so therefore it was just right for them to make sure that what only persons who have funded the schools are given opportunity in those places. But in Ghana, all taxpayers contribute to public education. So you cannot say that the schools are your schools, when we very well know that what we all contribute to taxes that run those schools.
But this is the point. You know that when it comes to the placement system, obviously looking at government's policy of, for instance, free senior high school, priority would have to be given to public school students, not so.
No, you have to give priority to Ghanaian children. Ghanaian children must be given the fair and equal opportunity to access schools that are Ghanaian schools.
If you clearly listen to the basis for which, for instance, Professor Amankwa was making his claim, he says this is the practice that you have elsewhere, and not just in Ghana. So if we're to adopt this, then we need to give priority to public
the price that we have elsewhere is on the basis of the fact that what elsewhere that community contributes to funding those schools. Mm-hmm. So who contributes to funding public schools in Ghana?
Ghanaian taxpayers.
Does the GS contribute to funding the schools? You don't own the schools. We own the schools.
But you agree that there's private interest at play here, isn't it? The fact that you're running a business, that's what you're doing.
When the Ghanaian become a private Ghanaian, public Ghanaian, when did we get there? What kind of analogy is that? How can you come to that conclusion that because your parents took you to a private school, therefore you cannot access public facility? How do you come by that? How did we get here?
Are you not oversimplifying matters? But particularly when he says all you need is a requirement. Take the entrance exam, let there be requirements.
We all go to write West African Examination Council basic certificate examination. Right. On merit, you are posted to schools. So you didn't do well, and now you are seeing that another group must not do that examination but come in with an entrance, a new kind of entrance examination. How can you say that? How can you say that?
What's been the level of engagement between your group and the Ghana Education Service? At least they are the service. You may have taken steps as well to reach out to the supervising ministry, which is the Education Ministry. What reactions are you getting from authorities on this matter?
And to the new act, and that was implemented this year, we had a seat actually in the Ghana Education Service. I even served on that body. So we worked hand in hand. So Ghana Education Service served both public and private. That is not the case now. With the new law, they are only working for public schools. But you see, it's a country where the constitution acknowledges that there's an opportunity for people to run private schools as well. Even in the advanced countries we are talking about, then what they should be doing actually is that part of the taxpayers' money should be given to those who want to go to private schools for fairness sake. So that if that will alleviate some of the cost of the education, then we are making it even more accessible. Instead of saying that if you don't go to a public school, you cannot get part of that national cake. I think it's unfair. That's not the basis for fair distribution of our resources.
And that's why I'm asking about the solution and your engagements with the authorities. What indication are you getting from them? Because first of all, this is not the first demand you've raised. You've started by raising even concerns about how private schools are excluded from placement when it comes to the free senior high school policy. That's where you started from. Yes. And then today we're here, you're dealing with the issues of placement as well. So it appears that there's a snowball effect. I don't know if that's how we should be terming all of that now.
We are saying that the Education Service can no longer become the body that will be in charge of the placement.
Why not?
No, because they'll be unfair. They are players and cannot be a referee.
At least we know. So why not create...
So we should shift that responsibility from that outfit, because this time they are being biased towards a section of a Ghanaian populace.
Right.
So we should shift that role from them to another body. Maybe NASIA could do that, where we all be fairly represented. Otherwise, a new body set up where we can be represented and be sure that we are treating every Ghanaian child fairly.
Let's break down the issues so our listeners can also follow. You are now being supervised by a new body, right? And that body is the National Inspectorate Authority. That's where all the supervisory activities are done for private schools.
For public and private schools.
Right. And now GES only focuses on the public schools, as you're telling me, per the new the new requirements, right?
So there is an inspector of schools.
Yes.
Under which we have public and private schools.
Right.
When it comes to running their schools, day-to-day running, GES in charge of the public schools running.
Yeah.
Then private schools run their schools as well. Okay, that's what it is like. We all come under a common inspector. So NASIA covers both public and private. So at this point, because they are not running schools, they can become a better referee. And not Ghana Education Service.
But some would say that once the private schools are not placed under the computerized placement system, then at least GES could go ahead and do what they're doing, because after all, they are not supervising you, they don't have the mandate over you, and all they are focusing on is in the public sector. So if you want to cross over, basically looking at the arrangements that you've done, then you would need some level of check measures or trying to set some exams for you as part of the requirements just for you to transition.
I'm sure then soon you will see that you cannot enter into any public university if you're from a private school. Very soon you will say that. But there's still that allowance. Are we okay? So we should understand that the system you're talking about indeed prevailed before, and it was rightly so.
Right.
Once we start changing the rules, it changes the structure completely. It's no longer the same structure in any way. That is why the Constitution says that whether public or private, all must assess the school. And we must all be given a common grounds to assessing these schools. If that is not happening, then we should be getting somebody who is neutral to do this work for us. And GES cannot be the neutral body. Cannot be neutral. NASIA takes care of both public and private schools. So NASIA will be maybe a fairer umpire at this point to be able to mediate between the two of us, GES and private schools.
If you want to go into a public school as we speak now, or carry out any activity in a public school, who or which of the institutions would you be dealing with? Okay,
so let's just say this. Every school basically is funded.
No, that's not the point. I'm asking precisely a direct question.
You want to go to a public school?
Yeah, to deal with the public school. Which of the agencies will you be dealing with?
You go through the Ghana Education Service.
Precisely. So that's a case where you have the Ghana Education Service handling placement into its various schools. So if they give you a requirement for which you should cross over into a public school, why complain about that?
You see, that was not how the framers looked at this, envisaged in the beginning. Ghana Education Service is only playing this role because before, when policies are made by the ministry, they implement the policy, tertiary, whether public or private. So they were the father for the two bodies. They are still assuming that role, even though right now they are discriminating against another arm.
No, you choose to use that word discrimination, and that's quite harsh for you to say they are discriminating. At least, do you have the data to back even the claim you're making about discrimination?
But he says so. He said that 30% have been reserved for them. And he said in that same interview that he even at other meetings suggested that they give the whole 100% to public schools or 80 to 90, so they can give private school maybe 30%. So that even with that, we should come in not with WAEC, but we should come in with one entrance examination.
Right.
You can't say that.
That's what you call discriminatory? That's a matter of policy, isn't it?
Public policy must be looking at the polity. So the policy, the polity, the politics.
Right.
Okay, so if a section of Ghanaians feel that, oh, this is a government who is towing a line, that is maligning their group.
Right.
What does that mean? It means that we're not a part of the system.
So let's look at the politics of it, because you gave three angles, right?
Yes.
The politics is the last angle. This is a government that is running the free senior high school. And you agree that quite a lot of people, even from the private places, who can even afford, and we are assuming without admitting, who can even afford private studies, and now making their way and flooding the public sector. Could this not just be a check measure by government? I mean, you surmise that they want to deal with that influx from the private sector into the public sector?
No, that's not the case. You see, initially, the structure is administered at what? We promote only the best to the top, initially. But we stopped the repetition system, and now we are even saying that even for BEC to SHS level, but for those who got maybe a grade 9, everybody is allowed to go and to finish SHS, which is a fine policy. So So we are trying to improve even access better. That's fine. Unfortunately, we don't have enough infrastructure. So what we should be doing as government actually is to be able to expand infrastructure. And we know it doesn't come easy. It's a gradual process. And we are hoping that we'll get to that point at some point in time. In the meantime, we should give every child the opportunity. Don't forget that anytime we deny the critical masses, the opportunity to go higher, it affects us. It just takes some few to create a space for the rest. Look at the world today. Take Elon Musk. Take Jeff Bezos. Look at Steve Jobs. No, he's gone. Let's take Bill Gates, and then maybe add Mark Zuckerberg to it. These four, they make more money than the whole of Africa. So it's not about just mass. What we want to make sure everybody gets the opportunity. You must not deny the critical masses that opportunity. If they are found in private schools, why not give them a chance? You don't say that because we went through private schools, it cannot be the case. And don't forget something. There have been situations where we built foundations learning for children up to primary school, and some, for some reason, decide to continue at the public sector, and they do very well. We still have that collaboration. That if somebody wants to stay through private schools to the end and write BEC, so be it. We should have the right of choice. It's also another right actually. So when you start denying people the right to make their choices and start forcing them to do what you want them to do, then we are getting it wrong. That becomes a human rights issue. And we actually intend to test the law.
I get that. So we need to go, because we don't have all of the time. I'll just take your last thoughts on this. You are equally asking President Akufo-Addo to take a number of remedial steps. Very briefly, what are your demands from President Akufo-Addo on this matter? Yes,
as a father of the nation, we saw that during the COVID break, he actually showed concern for us. He should stop the GS from continuing with this 30% policy without, if they're not going to include deprived private schools in the sharing of the 30%. He should stop the process.
How soon?
I think that this year is already gone. By the time we have our next admission season, which will be next year when we write in our BEC, the policy should be seen to be pro-poor, helping children who are coming from deprived.
And that's why it's shocking that your demands are coming in pro-poor. But I mean, you agree that private schools
it's a myth.
have parents who are able to afford for the education. I mean, that's a fact.
It's a myth. It's a myth that those who go to private schools are rich. It's a myth.
It's not true.
It's not true. There are
poor people attend
who are well-to-do, who have found their children in public schools. Well-to-do, and they're in public schools.
I'm talking about private schools, sir.
I'm talking about private school as well. There are private schools that are charging as low as 2 cedis. We saw it during the COVID era.
A private school charging as low as 2 Ghana cedis?
You did the coverage, and you saw that well. Some schools charge as low as 100 cedis a term, school fees. And the only reason they're in operation is because there are no schools in that neighborhood. But they can do a number of things for these children.
Right. Well, we'll continue this conversation sometime later. But John Keane-Nasel, thank you so much for joining us. He's the General Secretary for the Ghana National Association of Private Schools.